researcher of the Social Schools and Government of Tecnológico de Monterrey, Arturo Sánchez Gutiérrez, and the assistant to the Vice President, Dulce Vázquez from the Arizona University. We thank the presence of electoral board members from the National Electoral Institute, justices of the Federal Judiciary Electoral Court, of the Electoral Institute, and of the representatives from international and domestic organizations who are part of this forum. We also thank those who are following us in the live transmission. In order to start, we're going to give the floor over to Joe Matthews. Gracias. ¿Todos me escuchan? Correcto. El foro del 2023 inicia. Bienvenidos.
Typically, the Global Forum lasts 3 or 4 days. This one lasts 6, plus there was a pre-tour the last 2 days. There are nearly 200 speakers. There are so many people. The Global Forum is not an association, not an organization. It's a network, so it doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to you. Everyone can come. The problem is, we usually do this about 18 months. This is 5.5 months of preparation. We've invited a lot of people. Too many people, there's not enough time. So I have to offer you a rule that will make your mother unhappy. Do not say thank you. You can say thank you out there in the halls at the coffee breaks, but not during your time speaking on the stage or at the panel or the workshop. The best way you could say thanks to everyone in this forum is not to say thank you. That's the important point. With that, I should introduce myself briefly. I'm the co-president of the forum. I'm an editor, a democracy editor at Zocalo Public Square, an NGO in Los Angeles, which is part of Arizona State University. With that, and to keep things brief, my co-president, Bruno Kaufmann, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe, and buenas tardes por esta gran acogida en este gran lugar. Dear friends of democracy, dear participants of the 2023 Global Forum.
Foro Global 2023 sobre democracia moderna y directa. Estos son momentos atemorizantes, son momentos de confrontación y momentos de de la democracia que se va a publicar mañana, la red de investigación de la democracia.
The overall level of democracy is back to the state of 1986. There are now more autocracies than democracies for the first time in 20 years. Freedom of expression is worsening in 35 countries. 10 years ago, there were 7 countries. And the current wave of autocratization spans all regions of the world. Today, 5.7 billion people live under autocracy. That's 72% of the world population, an increase of almost 50% in 10 years only. So it seems that our efforts in the last 15 years, since we the very first time gathered for the Global Forum on Modern Direct Democracy, has been in vain. But in contrary, these 15 years of worldwide networking, knowledge exchange, and development of cooperative tools has been most important and useful when we now together face anti-democratic attacks. They come as silent attempts of intimidation or brutal invasion wars against neighbors. While we are very obviously not resilient enough to fend off these attacks, we have become much more ready to act, to inform, to develop participatory rights and institutions, and to cooperate across borders. What we face today is the fundamental question about our common future, run by autocratic violence or by democratic cohabitation. The Global Forum on Modern Direct Democracy is and remains an invitation to all across the globe to join the fight for human rights, free and fair elections, and everyday participation. This forum gathers people from all walks of life. You, me, everybody. Viva la democracia!
Para continuar, damos la palabra a la consejera Carla Astrid Humphrey Jordan.
Gracias. to be in this forum after what we were just told by Joy and Bruno Bertrand. They invested 5.5 months in order to organize this event. And the truth, and as Bruno said, we're in a complicated point in time, not only in Mexico, but also in the rest of the world. We've seen different indices and rates that speak about the state of democracy all over the world. And I would like to recuperate, I would like to share with you information from Idea International, the report of the Global Status of Democracy of 2022, where more than 50% of democratic governments of the world are declining, affected by problems that include restrictions to freedom of speech and mistrust in the legitimacy of the elections. This reduction and this damage comes when elected people face unprecedented events such as economic slowing down, the crisis and the cost of life, like the war in Ukraine, the one that has been in existence for 1 year. It is like the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and it also tells us that the number of countries with this background, with a more severe democratic erosion is increasing, and it includes well-established democracies like the one of the United States that is facing political polarization, institutional dysfunction, and threats against civil freedoms. At the world level, this report indicates that the number of countries that is making progress towards authoritarianism is more than twice the number of countries which are making progress towards democracy. Within this context, it is very important to have new ways to channel the interests of all citizens. Direct democracy undoubtedly is one way to make citizens, to allow them to listen, to give them a voice in the participation processes in our countries. We should all have this different way. It should not only be through the elections. It is not only a matter of voting once every 3 years or every 6 years. And this is what is so important in Mexico to value which are these direct democracy mechanisms at the country level. We're coming late to this direct democracy mechanism. It was in the year 2021 with the first People's Consult, the one that was called taking former presidents to trial, the first mandate revocation a year ago. And at the state level, we're making a little bit more progress. We have made progress in terms of participative budget referendum, different processes that have taken place and that have been successfully organized by the electoral authorities, but we still have an important deficiency. We do not have the sense of ownership of these direct democracy mechanisms, and this is what we see in the number popular consult, less than 8% of citizens participation, mandate revocation, 17.7% of participation. And I believe this is why we should look for new ways for citizens to be able to manifest themselves, and we want them to participate in the fate of our countries, and this will give rise to great possibilities such as a country. And in this country where we consolidate democracy, first we need to know the established framework where we need to act, and secondly, let's work in a agile manner, transparently with information, and let's do this. Let's make them procedures of the citizens for the citizens in those situations which are clearly the responsibility, which is an interest for all the citizens. And this is precisely how we need to see these new spaces of citizens' participation, not only representative democracy, but also these direct democracy spaces. I believe we have a very important role at the electoral authority level, at the INE, but undoubtedly as a country we have also more important challenges, because citizens should be more critical. They need to participate even more. They should be even more aware of the fate that is ahead of not only national democracies, but also international democracies. So it is my honor to be here, and of course I wish you the best success, the greatest success for attending this forum, and you're always welcome to this country, to Mexico. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to give the floor over to board member Patricia Bendaño Duran. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. Thanks to all the attendees to this auditorium, and thanks who are attending this event virtually. I also would like to salute those who are in this meeting, those who came from different countries of origin. You are all welcome. Be welcome to Mexico City. And this time, we are very privileged to be the seat of this global forum on direct and modern democracy. In this very important event for exchange of ideas, analysis, and reflection about the theory and the practice of direct democracy, I am certain that many of us are going to be looking for answers to problems that affect our societies. We will get to see the different experiences of how direct democracy mechanisms are being applied. We're going to identify good practices and opportunities, window opportunities for the implementation. I am certain that it's going to be a two-way knowledge. We're very happy to have you here in Mexico City. It is a challenge in many different areas, and there is also a challenge in democratic aspects. This city in recent years has been immersed in this development and recovery of the democratic exercise. In a nutshell, we can say that it was a little bit more than 30 years that we have had the possibility to elect our governors, to elect those who were the members of the Legislative Assembly, those who had limited powers, similar to a local Congress with very limited powers. And it was in 1997 when we had the possibility to elect our governor. And after that, those who are heading the political administrative entities in the 16 territorial townships that we call alcaldías. And during this transition, the Electoral Institute of Mexico City was created, as well as the Citizens Participation Law was passed, and it brought mechanisms and instruments to allow the inhabitants of this great city to participate in the public policies and decisions. And during this time, we also included referendum and plebiscite and the mandate revocation, among others. And this is precisely what the Electoral Institute is doing its effort. The service vocation convenes that democracy is built on a daily basis, and we are responsible for that. Welcome to this place of reflection that is going to be so enriching to all of us. Thank you very much. In order to continue, we're going to give the floor over to Mario de Leobinque. Thank you very much. Thank you, Langrasten, on behalf of Jose Antonio de los Reyes Seria, General Director of the National Metropolitan University. Le mandamos saludos del presidente. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it to this important event. And when I knew about the great scholars, personalities, experts in democracy we were going to have in this event, I thought, what can I contribute? For 23 years, I've been dedicated to the communication of knowledge, but I believe we can contribute a lot. My team and me worked with the Electoral Institute of Mexico City. We created an educational game that has to do with the values of democracy, the actions of the citizens, and to preserve ajolotes. Remember, this is an endemic species. You can download this game, Holocracia. And the rest was different, but the fight for the perseverance and the establishment of democracy perpetuates with knowledge and with education. This is the only way and the foundation for the well-informed decisions and the very important development of critical thinking. All this comes from the classroom, and it gives the citizens the tools in order to vote with knowledge and with conscience and with all the necessary information in order to defend the truth on top of the constant misinformation, to always to have well-informed decisions. But what happens after the formal education? How do we talk to citizens? There are many studies that speak about the extracurricular education and this informal and ludic information, how we can talk to the citizens and we can speak about the values of democracy with all the people. And these exercises will normally take place through publications, but publication is an obsolete vertical approach that can be very intrusive in communities, and this is why the best practice is to do horizontal dialogue practices with the communities, and this is what Sara Corona has studied this a lot at the University of Guadalajara for 20 years now. And we, as people experts in higher education, we need to build trust. We need to find the understanding of our peers, people we're going to be working with. This is part of the work at the university. We need to understand the concerns, the needs, and the questions of our citizens. We need to include them in all the different projects which are going to be implemented by the universities doing research, and this would allow us to have a plural exercise. We're going to listen, we're going to have meetings, and we're going to reach agreements and have benefits. But horizontal communications is not being used by experts. They are to talk to the communities, and this has to end. I will give you two pieces of information. INEGI survey says that 58% of the people in Mexico considers that scientific researchers are dangerous. peril because of the knowledge they have, that they are dangerous. And another study says in Mexico City that 90% of the people believes that we should have more scientists in Mexico, but only 8% of people want their children to be the next scientists. So someone else has to be doing this, but we do not know who is going to be doing that activity. This is an evidence of the great responsibility we have as higher education academic institutions, our responsibility to bring data and the values of democracy. We have a great window of opportunity. So out of 80,000 researchers we have in Mexico, we have this great responsibility in order to keep communicating horizontally and in a dialogue to communicate research. We need to speak about the close relationship between information, knowledge, and the benefits in order to build and to make democracy perpetual. Because we want citizens to have facts. We want them to have clear facts in order to then benefit the country. And in order to conclude, I will make this quote, a timely quote by Pablo González Casanova. And the quote is, "Since we're optimistic, this is why we fight, and because we are hopeful in our fate, we are critical. But we do not accept authoritarian optimism. We do not expect hope without critical thinking." Thank you very much. Next, we're going to give the floor over to Dulce Vázquez. Hello, good afternoon. First, what Leo has said on behalf of the university. I am Dulce Vázquez, and I am a binational. I was born here in Tampico, Tamaulipas, and I am very honored to be here and to represent both countries, the United States and both the Arizona State University and the United States. I've been in this university for 12 or 13 years, and I love to see how we interact with the rest of the world. We have many professors who study everything: democracy, political sciences, comparative politics, race, and we have the Center for the Race and for Democracy. We have another Center for Work and for Democracy. It publishes a report of the Electoral Initiative Project. We also have training sessions about the national service and American democracy. We have a college that teaches public service and community solutions, because we know all democracy is local. But I believe that our best present for this cause is to have a well-educated world-class citizens with almost 200,000 students in person and online. So we believe that educating the next generation and to encourage their participation is maybe the most powerful tool in order to preserve our prosperous democracy and to help communicate democracy at the world level. And we count on all of you so that you can host our students all over the world, and we will also welcome you all in Arizona in our different campi we have in Los Angeles and in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. In order to continue, we're going to give the floor over to Claudia Isela Guzmán González. Good afternoon, everyone. Finally, after how many months and years of work? It's been 5 years, in fact. My heart is jumping. It's so excited, and it is very emotional. It is pretty enthusiastic. And I'm speaking about from my heart and about my heart, because I will be speaking about a very specific topic. What has the heart to do with democracy? Here you have it. My mom always told me, do things from your heart, with your heart. And at the beginning of this conversation is not an assignment. It is not a romantic beginning. It is what do we do in IDECO, the organization I am pleased to chair, the Institute for Democratic Development and Competitiveness, located in Mexico and with 5 international offices. And what we do is to build citizenship through the promotion of citizen competences and through the linking of international organizations and cooperation. We work with 3 verbs: cooperation, cooperation, and cooperation. 3 verbs, only those 3 verbs: cooperation, cooperation, and cooperate. And when I speak about the heart, is because in this forum we have the heart of the democratic institutions of my country, the heart of the administrative organizations, the heart of the civil society, the heart of the academia, the heart of all the activists from the world. I am speaking about the world. Those who are gathered together, they are a critical entity, and the definition of heart in IDECO is that we should do our best. Our vital force should be brought in order to attain a result through the honoring objectives, complying with the commitments. And in today's forum, we're going to bring our hearts, but not as a romantic heart. It is as a heart that has seen the risks of not bringing our heart into democracy. This heart, it is an entity, it is a body that will allow us to honor the commitments. We need to recognize that direct democracy is the journey to establish criteria and to establish agreements. Direct democracy, just to speak about, just to give you one example in my country, it represented this quantity or this amount in the evaluation, 57,449 certificates out of more than 16,502,000 votes. So it is a heart that represents 70% of the participation, 17% of the participation. If we see the electoral voters list, 92,823,000 people in this nominal listing of voters. And I can speak about other consults that have been performed and other participative exercises after 9 years of the administrative and the electoral authority in my country. The work of your court, and I will like to say that it is more than thousands and millions of resolutions, and after 9 years, this is what they have resolved with the heart of open justice at the level of electoral authority. I would like to conclude and to welcome, I would like to welcome the core team, and I would like to thank the core team, and I will name only a few people, but I'm sure I will be unjust because I will not be telling all the names. Itzel Riva, Laye Sejek, the Institute, and all those people who are part of this exercise, because you are the heart of what we're going to be seeing in these days to come. Consults and all the exercises we're going to be doing will undoubtedly be an historical exercise. It will be an exercise. We're going to be working with the 5 continents, as Bruno said yesterday, and they now represent us as the heart of the Global Forum of Democracy. Bienvenidos a la Ciudad de México. Felicidades por los resultados. Next, we're going to listen to Arturo Sánchez Gutiérrez. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. We're the Tecnológico de Monterrey. Democracy is one of the motivating pillars to educate young people across Mexico. To participate in this forum is making us very proud, and it becomes a platform so that we can promote political participation of our students in a free space for the academic debate. We know, and I would like to be critical, we know that democracy is facing new challenges all over the world, specifically in Latin America. The pending assignments that speak about our economic situation, the persistent inequality, insecurity, and violence, amongst other terrible events, as democracy, new ways to have citizens' participation. Democracy is facing backwardness and stagnation that it will only restrict the freedom and will weaken the electoral institutions. With this, we would be losing the certainty in the election processes of our governors. I would like to think that in this forum that will address the different types of direct democracy that we have seen in our societies, this forum is going to be the continuation of a debate that could lead us to the empowerment of people, and we can listen to each other on a timely basis. We can be bold when listening to all the citizens, and we can also be critical so that we can correct, amend, and propose public policies that should take us to a better social situation all over the world. the exchange of experiences that we are going to have in these days, I'm certain in them we are going to find applicable alternatives and proposals for the different realities of our country. Congratulations for that. And just for the fact of having this space open, we should commend each other, ourselves. And I also would like to express a concern, and as democracy is a system that we need to always take care of, at the different institutions and laws, I believe the systems we designed to strengthen direct democracy should be carefully built, well-oriented, and protected since the beginning. A good intention in order to organize a consult, for example, the consult of the citizens can easily deviate, divert, if it doesn't have the legal resources, the technical and human and economic resources that would allow to have credibility and convince the society to participate, to make it a meaningful consult and transcendent. This is one of the aims of this forum, is to discuss the risks direct democracy faces if its mechanisms are used as a manipulation mechanisms in order to make progress in the personal political agendas. This could happen. This has happened. I believe the analysis of the recent history of Mexico is very interesting, and we have already spoken about the progress we've made in this country in relationship of different types of direct participation. We have very clear examples, the ones we have already quoted, people's consults and mandate revocation, but the application didn't give rise to a great citizens' participation, and this is because the driving forces of those exercises didn't directly come from the citizens, and this is precisely what we need to take care of. However, we have many other exercises that Mrs. Humphrey has quoted across the country where progress has been made. The participative budget consult, for example, in Mexico City, and people, it is a consult of citizens as how to exercise part of the budget, and this type of exercise has made good progress. It is good to have more than 90 countries, 20 electoral international authorities, universities and organizations of the civil society, together with the National Institute, Electoral Institute, public entities, the Electoral Court, and the Federal Electoral Court, and all the international representations we have here. We are all here together because we want to build citizenship and we want to promote our democracies. And I also would like to ask my personal concern today. We should also take care of what Tocqueville said, and then George Trousdale said in his text about freedom. Be careful. Be careful with the possible tyranny of the majorities. Democracy will only be possible as long as the will of the citizens is taken into consideration. The will of all citizens. Thank you very much. In order to continue, we're going to give the floor over to Carola Garcia Calderon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to salute the attendees, in-person attendees, and those who are at the distance through the digital channels. It is my pleasure as Director of the Political and Social Science School of our National Autonomous University of Mexico to be present in this global direct democracy forum. Within the framework of this forum, we need to recognize the importance of direct democracy. This is going to allow for new mechanisms of citizens' participation, and they will strengthen and contribute to the actions of the civil society with those instruments that would allow us citizens to participate in the decision-making process and in the creation of policies and in the public life of our country. It is good to recognize the importance of democracy. We have to recognize it as a condition that will be attained only through the enforcement of fundamental rights of citizens in Mexico. It's been a long journey. It's been a long way that we have had for many, many years with the citizens, social organizations, educational institutions. In order to make progress in our democratic life, we have tried to build channels, mechanisms and institutions, as well as legal tools that would allow us to have a greater participation. We need to remember that democracy is built and is going to be preserved as a result of a set of social and historical processes, and this is why we have to understand democracy as a social and political bet that needs an ongoing training of conscious, critical, ethical and participative citizens. Democracy is not only a political system. Democracy should be a way of living. It goes beyond the electoral perspective. It is understood as a system that promotes and allows the respect of rights and freedom of people, the creation of opportunities, the same opportunities for everyone, the rule of law established. Fundamental elements of our peaceful social relationships, the streets, the virtual spaces, the voting places, the different ways of participation. All this is inviting us to rethink the existing peaceful channels so that we can listen and serve the needs of a great part of the population. And for political representation, I commend this Global Forum on Modern and Direct Democracy, and with the attendance of many different representatives from more than 60 countries, would allow us to think, would allow us to analyze and to share the different experiences of many different countries in the world, and we will also learn for the specific case of our country. Congratulations to all of you. Welcome to Mexico. Bienvenidos. And we wish you the best success in all the sessions you're going to have during the forum. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to give the floor over to Justice Reyes Rodriguez Mondragon. Good afternoon. Welcome. Welcome all people who have traveled to Mexico City. Congratulations to those who organize this global forum today in Mexico, like in many other places in the world. There are citizens who are more active, more participative, citizens who want to be considered in the most relevant public decisions. And in order to respond to this vibrant situation, we include direct participation mechanisms, and with these mechanisms, citizens will have more opportunities to participate in the debate and in the public space. They get involved in the decision-making process relative to those matters that directly affect their societies, and they approach and get closer to their communities through institutions and democracy processes. But this wouldn't happen automatically. In the democratic language, it is necessary to have clear rules and unbiased independent authorities that will surveil these exercises. Direct participation mechanisms are relatively new in Mexico, despite of the fact that at the local level, they were considered before being included in the political constitution of Mexico. Personally, I commend the inclusion of all these instruments, and I am certain, I have the conviction that they will allow for new ways to have citizens' participation, and all of them will enrich our democratic life. It is necessary to recognize that because of how new they are, these exercises are, there are different challenges for the electoral authorities so that we can guarantee their execution. The first mandate revocation exercise in April last year made it visible that it is necessary to make direct democracy mechanisms more perfect so that citizens can have the sense of ownership. This exercise was done in difficult scaffolding that made the process difficult, and it didn't have the democratic quality expected. The soundness of the Mexican electoral institutions was key in order to face that and to face that hindrance, and specifically the electoral court resolved more than 6,000 controversies, and after that exercise, the electoral court determined, amongst others, how necessary it was to have a law in order to have the mandate revocation. And we also need to have strong institutions and the necessary budget, and we need to also have the institutional and standard-based sound scaffolding in order to cope with all these challenges so that we can guarantee the enforcement of political rights of Mexican people, to promote stability, lawfulness, and the certainty that is needed in every democracy, and to have a safer route in order to peacefully resolve the controversies, political and electoral controversies. Ladies and gentlemen, A vibrant democracy demands the construction of access ways to citizens' participation, a more dynamic citizens' participation, a more demanding citizens' participation. And in order to have professional exercises, credible exercises, it is necessary to have Democrat people with a Republican talent committed to the culture of lawfulness with equality and with the institutions and the processes of the democratic system. It is necessary to have the commitment of those political players and of the citizenship so that law can be enforced. It is indispensable as a society and as a political community to to have a tolerant and constructive dialogue and conversation. Precisely a forum like this is very important so that we can think about the needs to strengthen our democratic system, to make it more inclusive and to make it more socially responsible. I wish the activities of this direct modern democracy global forum would allow us all to learn from the different experiences. Thank you very much and congratulations for this 4 days. Last but not least, we're going to give the floor over to the chair of Electoral National Institute, Lorenzo Córdoba Vianello. Welcome, friend, and you will have the chance to express yourself later. Thank you. I will start my participation, but stay. Stay. It is a matter of having this conversation. It is not only a matter of insulting. Bye-bye. Thank you. You are invited to stay. You are invited to stay. But insult is not for democratic people. I would like to start this intervention with this exercise of rebelness. Me? I will not be paying attention to you. And I will start with my gratitude. I will not pay attention or obey you. First, I would like to thank all those institutions who made this 11th edition of the Global Forum possible, the Direct and Modern Democracy Global Forum. Secondly, I would like to thank the presence and the interventions, the participation of all those who are representatives, friends all from the academic institutions and public institutions attending this event. Thirdly, I would like to specifically thank Joe Matthews and Bruno Kaufman, co-chairs of the Global Modern Democracy Global Forum for their tenacity, insistence, and this is the reason why we are here in Mexico inaugurating this forum. Thirdly, I would like to salute, and I also would like to thank my friend, admired friend, the Justice of the Electoral Court of the Judicial Branch of the Federation, Justice Reyes Rodriguez. To all the ones attending and being here, those who are here, thanks for your dedication, for the effort you are making to be here all together. And last but not least, I would like to thank specifically and very particularly Edmundo Jacobo Molina, the Executive Secretary of our Electoral Institute, public officer, a role model who during 14 years of dedication and democratic vocation has contributed to building a Mexico of freedoms, a Mexico of rights we to have today. An officer who in the hours to come, in the next hours, and this is because of an arbitrary reform, an unconstitutional reform, regressive and anti-democratic reform, is going to be fired. He's going to be seized of his position. Thanks, Edmundo. In this space, you're still the Executive Secretary of the National Electoral Institute, because democracy, the Mexican society, the National Electoral Institute owe you a lot. And when the constitutional and democratic order is reestablished, Edmundo, we're going to be waiting for you. You're going to be back to the Institute. I am very proud because for the first time in our country, we are holding, and in different cities and places, we are holding this global forum that is becoming, after more than 10 years now, it is becoming a space not only for shared reflection, but also for collective action, reflection and actions guided to understand the present and the future of democracy in general terms, and also, and above all, to understand the multiple ways in which direct democracy is going to be shaping all over the world how the political dimension expresses the political expression of our life in common. I recognize and I value that those who organize this global forum decided to include different visions and experiences about what is the meaning of direct democracy, not only in Mexico and in Latin America, but also in many other countries and regions. And not only at the federal level and at this level of at the center of our country, but also at the local level in places such as the Bajío and the Mexican southeastern part of the country. Democracy is nourished by diversity. It is nourished by the plurality in the ways of understanding and experiencing common life, to participate and collectively participate in the priorities which are of interest to different communities, always respecting and recognizing that multiplicity of visions, that plurality. I insist on this. And despite of the authoritarian visions that try to unify only one command, only one under one expression only, to have all these complexities and diverse entities like the ones we see in the people, the direct participation in the decision-making process. In the case of public interest matter, is something distinctive in all democracies. The old classical and ancient times. Active participation is what we see in common life. The Athens Agora and the public plazas in our contemporary cities, democracy will be understood and its cultural value when asking for participation, when we express our voices and to be able to clearly listen to it in the public forum respectfully, in a tolerant way, with the rest of the visions, even if those visions are different from ours. This is what we see in our societies. Democracy has an architecture, and it's supported in the parliamentarian assemblies and structures, and it is also based on fluid, dynamic spaces in public plazas. And in both cases, as in parliament as well as in open spaces in the representative and direct democracy, the main pillar is citizenship, the plurality of voices that want to participate so that they can be served and listened to directly or in representation to make a part of the decisions process for the future. Direct democracy doesn't happen in vacuum, and its success cannot be analyzed in an isolated way, separate from the political, economic, and cultural aspects, because this is a context where we are. And of course, success as a mechanism to amplify the citizens' voice is going to become stronger when it interacts favorably, not when it goes against the institutionality of the representative democracy. There is no question, there is no doubt that the direct and representative dimension of democracy should complement each other in order to establish a positive dynamic that is going to rescue democracy in general from the crisis and the harassment that has been suffered for some years now. From that logic, the direct democracy mechanisms and the inclusion to the representative political systems is an expression of the vital and resilient feature instruments such as the People's Consult, plebiscites, participative budget, and mandate revocation. This is just to name a few examples. All this should renew and inject a freshness and dynamism to the electoral participation that characterizes representative democracy, instead of replacing it. And it can even contribute to the strengthening of the context of the citizens' demands in the institutions, considering the characteristics of the representative democracy. And all this will happen as long as these direct mechanisms come along with authentic deliberation processes, tolerant respect towards the different stances, a deliberation that is going to be inclusive and deep about all the different topics which are being submitted to the consultation of our citizens, deliberation process. And this deliberation should also be part of the different electoral processes that we see in the representative democracy, all the way from the classic ancient times. And this is what we see in political theory. If there is something that distinguishes the democracy, is precisely the deliberation that comes before the discussions and before the public decisions. He corrected himself. Not all the decisions which were made without deliberation. It can happen at the Congress level in open spaces. It is like the laws which arbitrarily, without being read, can be passed in less than 3 hours after being submitted. Democracy is not only an appointment with a box, with a ballot every X number of years with the election, the recreation of democracy. This is something to be exercised every day in a persistent manner, even outside of the decision-making processes space. Direct democracy is not only at the moment of consult or plebiscite or mandate revocation. Direct democracy is something that happens every day. We live difficult times for democracy, regardless of the different mechanisms it takes. Polarization and questions about the most elemental shared facts, as well as harassment from power, a more generalized harassment, a more concerning harassment in modern democracies with respect to institutions that will enforce, guarantee the exercise of vote and the respect and the guarantee of human rights, or the citizens' mistrust with respect to the representatives' many values, behaviors, rules that will shape the democratic life. All this has been eroded gradually, but in every region in the world, unlike in other countries, including our Latin American region, Mexico, unfortunately, hasn't been the exception to those global trends. In our country, despite of the achievements and despite of the irrefutable and undeniable conquests we have attained after many years, mainly in terms of the representative democracy, but also in the guarantees of participation and certainty in the direct consult processes, with citizens, there are some people who seemingly want to bring dynamite to our representative democracy. And if there is something we have seen in recent times in many, many countries, is that the route to direct democracy, the route of the citizens' voices, which want to be listened to in the public spaces, not only when participating in the decision-making process, but also when we have protests to defend the rights and the freedoms, as well as the institutions, without losing the commitment with plurality and tolerance. Those voices are rescuing the representative democracy. Those voices are stopping the authoritarian characteristics we're starting to see how they are present in our countries today. And we saw this in recent days. There are different expressions of direct democracy. Citizens taking ownership of the plazas. They are protesting. They are defending their rights and their freedoms and their institutions. And people are are coming out to defend mechanisms and representative democracy institutions. Direct democracy is today fighting. It is defending the representative democracy. In this duet, which is very different compared to those we see in the parliaments and in the plaza, in the open spaces. Parliaments and the open spaces or the plazas are simply two expressions of the democratic force of our societies. One as a representative one, and the other one through the exercise and direct defense of the democratic conquests that we have attained so far. Democracy will never be the product of only one person, of only one group. It will not be the result of only one political party. Democracy is a collective and daily activity, assignment, as John King said. When analyzing the life and the death of democracies all over the world, if there is something evident, is that when democracies are born, this is going to be the product of many, many wills, the collective action of multiple groups and people, and the death of democracies is going to be the result, yes, of those who attack democracies, but it is the result of also those who observe in a passive manner. How? others are destroying democracy and how others destroy institutions, and when they do nothing about it. All democracies that have died along the history of mankind will always have people responsible. Two responsible entities. One, the one that autocratically will attack a democracy, will harass it, will erode it, will dismantle it. But we also have others, many more, who indirectly observe without raising their voices, without protesting, without going out to the street. And they see how this democracy, their democracy, how little by little it dies, it passes away. It dies in moments where democracy, in every way and in every expression and in many different places in the world, it goes through complex moments of institutional erosion, polarization, and intolerance, and attacks from the public power, and untrust by citizens, justified by the lack of results of the public policies that were implemented by democratically elected governments. To celebrate, to have the possibility to be in this meeting, to have this global forum on direct democracy. This is a way to commend ourselves and to be hopeful. This is why I deeply thank institutions and people who work together with the INE to organize this forum. I wish you the best so that the works, reflections, and discussions that will happen today and during the course of this modern direct global forum will trigger action processes that will bring encourage the excitement of people so that we can stop being condescendent. We want our societies to be triggered, driven by this, and this is precisely what our democracy needs. Thank you very much. Congratulations, and I wish you the best during the course of this global forum. This is how we conclude the inauguration of this global forum, and the National Electoral Institute thanks the members of this table of honor, all the attendees, and those who have been in our live transmission. Have a great rest of the evening. Next, we're going to have all the, we will continue with our agenda. We're going to have an inaugural interview. How can direct democracy can be used for political reforms, climate action, initial stories about democracy all over the world. Hola, ya está nuestro siguiente orador, We're going to continue with our activity. Joe Matthews, he is ready. Now we're going to start, Joe. Tenemos 5 minutos de conteo. No, ya, tenemos que arrancar. We're going to start our countdown. 1. Joe Matthews. Gobernador, ¿me puede escuchar? Gobernador, ¿me escucha? Arnold, ¿me escuchas? Hola, Arnold, ¿me escuchas? Ay, te puedo escuchar. Es magnífico que estés con nosotros. Muchísimas gracias. Y no tenía yo que agradecer. Rompí mi regla. Este foro no existiría sin ti. Nos reunimos en el 2006 en tu oficina, Bruno y yo. Estábamos reporteando y estamos aquí por ti. ¿Cómo te va? ¿Estás listo?
I'm ready.
Estoy listo.
Do we have him on screen, though? Yes, there he is. So, Governor, the world knows you for many reasons, but one thing that not everyone knows about you is that you are one of the leading practitioners of democracy in the United States, which makes you one of the leading practitioners in the world. I'm not sure we're advertising that, but you've done so much on democracy that it's hard for me to cover it all or introduce you properly. But there are 3 big areas where you've done a lot of things that are very important to all the people from 6 continents who are in this room with us in Mexico City. Youth, democratic reform, fighting corruption, and fighting pollution, the climate issue. And so I want to start by asking you, I want to ask you about each of these 3 and start with talking about youth and the work you've done. Back in 2002, you weren't governor yet, you were just Arnold. You had worked for many years building after-school programs in many places around the United States, and you'd learned how poorly funded they were in so many places. So you drafted a law to put the people of California as a ballot initiative to guarantee a piece of the California budget for after-school programs. You qualified the measure, you campaigned for it, and then the voters approved it. Now, 21 years later, that initiative, Prop 49, is still there. The US government recently urged states to try to copy it because California is doing so much more, devoting so much more resources to after-school programs, actually more than the other 49 states combined, according to the US Department of Education. Here's my question. When you think back about the lessons of that experience and after-school programs on youth work and democracy, what should people here take from this story, especially for the really challenging thing that we face in so many countries? It's hard to get power and resources to children and youth because in democracies, we don't let them vote.
Well, Joe, first of all, thank you very much to you and Bruno Kaufmann for having me on your program. Unlike you, I like to thank people. I think that the most important thing, is that to recognize that politicians a lot of times do not represent the people. You know, we are talking here about a profession that is not to be trusted. It's people that are not keeping their promises. It's people that are corrupt. It's people that just go after low-hanging fruits. It's people that are cowards a lot of times. And I'm not talking about everybody. I'm talking about a lot of the people in the politics are like that. And so it was no surprise to me when I had ran this after-school program in California, and I asked for more money in Sacramento. Democrats and Republicans alike basically turned me down and said, no, we are in the middle of a recession, it's very difficult to do, and we cannot do it, and all that stuff. So I said to myself, well, they're out of touch, because the reality of it is more than 70% of the kids come from a home where both of the parents are working. So there's no one there in the afternoon. So what are the kids supposed to do? Where do they get their homework? Where are they going to go and have someone take care of them into sports programs, or take them to a movie theater, or just do some tutoring, or some mentoring or something? There was no one there. So I said, we need after-school programs, and I've seen it firsthand, they work. But the politicians had no interest because the children didn't have a lobbyist to lobby for that money. So therefore, they didn't do the work. So I had to go directly to the people. So I got in touch with the former governor, Pete Wilson, and I asked him if he can provide me with his team that is somewhere in California and help me draft an initiative. And we drafted the initiative, and I put millions of dollars of my own money into it, and I went up and down the state and campaigned and campaigned and campaigned. And then all of a sudden the Democrats and the Republicans started endorsing it. And they started really going kind of all out and say, yeah, this is actually a good idea. And it won with 57% of the votes. So it was a huge, huge victory for education. It was a huge victory for the children and for the parents and for the whole state, because we know that when you provide after-school programs, every dollar we spent in an after-school program, you save $3 down the line, because those kids are in a safe place. They're off the streets, because when kids are not off the streets, they get between 3 and 6 o'clock in the afternoon into trouble. They get into trouble by teenage pregnancy, through juvenile crime, joining gangs and violence and alcohol and drugs and all of those things. All of the things that cost much more money than the after-school program itself. So therefore, the studies at the Rose Institute was very clear that for every dollar we invest, we get $3 back in savings. Okay. And so this is why in the end, everyone, agreed with it, and I got this done, and I was very, very happy. And I think that the other thing that I want to say is that we have now just celebrated the 20th anniversary, like you said, of Proposition 49, the After School Education and Safety Act. And we are going all out nationwide, promoting it. And so much so in our celebration, we had the Secretary of Education from the Biden administration come out here and celebrate with us and say, as you already said, that this ought to be done nationwide. So it's again one of those examples that what happens in California, goes nationwide, and people look at it. Look, states are there for being the laboratory for the federal government. So we know now it works, and we have now $500 million extra money for after-school programs. That is more money that is being spent in the state of California than that is being spent on a national level, all 49 states combined. Think about that. How much money we spend in compare, or I should say invest, rather than what other states are doing. And so I think it is important that we have this opportunity of direct democracy, so that when the politicians, like in most cases, do not do their work, that then we have to come in, the people, and use people power.
Let me ask you about that in another context. In political corruption and the democratic process itself, when you, as your governor, the U.S. practice is that in most places, legislators pick their own, they get to draw the districts, the single-member districts they're in. Essentially, politicians pick their voters rather than the other way around. You made a big issue of this. You didn't like it. You tacked it. In 2005, when you were governor, you went through the citizens process to qualify an initiative, and as I think the phrase was used at the time, you got your butt kicked. There was even a dashing young Los Angeles Times reporter at the time who wrote something to the effect of that Arnold should give this up, this cause. It's not really selling. He's never going to win. Now, you didn't take that reporter's advice. It was me. And you kept going. You're still going on this subject. What is the story of what has happened since 2005, redistricting, in California and now in many other states in the country, with multiple ballot initiatives?
Well, Joe, as you know, I was always trying to kind of rattle the cage in Sacramento. I always said that I don't want to be one of the many politicians, that I'm an outsider and I want to come in and bring some fresh ideas in there. And so it was very clear to me that the politicians drew the district lines, and they drew it in such a way that they protected their jobs. So they didn't have to really run that much for re-election or so. So in a Democratic district, only a Democrat could win. In a Republican district, only Republicans could win. And so the left stayed way to the left, the right stayed way to the right. And so those two never could really get together and make a deal or compromise, because otherwise they go back to their district and get punished. So therefore it didn't work. It was a corrupt system. And the interesting thing about it was that it was a corrupt system for more than 200 years, not in California alone, but all over America. It's a totally corrupt system where, like you said, the politicians pick their voters rather than the voters picking the politicians. And so what I did basically was I said, look, we got to change that. And everyone said to me that you can't change that. This is an old system that's in place and that no one wants to do it. The Democrats don't want to do it. The Republicans want to do it. They all benefit from that. And so I said, okay, then I'm going to go and do it anyway. I asked the legislators to go and provide me with a bill. They didn't. So I had no choice to go directly to the people. But then when I went directly to the people, you know, I think that just like it is in weightlifting, you know, I didn't lift 500 pounds in a bench press the first time. I failed. And I failed the second time, and I failed the third time, and I failed the fourth time, and I failed and failed and failed. But on an 11th attempt, I did it. And the same is with this. We learn from mistakes, and we learn from failure. I learned that I did not communicate well enough the first time, so I did got, you know, a major defeat. But that was okay. To me, I'm not afraid of failure. As long as you know that you're doing the right thing, you just keep going and pushing and pushing. And you're absolutely right. Journalists ask me, said, don't you get the message? This initiative process and this, you know, fighting for, you know, redistricting reform has failed now many times. Only getting the message from the people that they don't like that. And I said, no, I don't get that message. I said, we're going to do it over and over, and we're just going to improve on the messaging and on the communication. Because that is the important thing here. I know that the people are smart enough. I have faith in the people. And so what happened was eventually it won. I was absolutely right. In 2008 it won, and then we got on top of it in 2010 open primaries and all of those kind of things. So it was a huge victory. And now we have this system, even though we don't have direct democracy nationwide, which I'm sorry to say, but the bottom line is that, you know, more than 20% of the states now have already, you know, a redistricting reform, where they have independent commissions drawing the district lines. And so tremendous progress has been made. Again, the nation is going in that direction because they've seen the great success in California. And in California, we are getting much more done now because both of the parties work better together and because we have an independent commission drawing the district lines. That is the important thing.
Made up of regular people on those.
So again,
Not connected. The people on those commissions are regular people, not connected
there's
to.
a regular people, they're not politicians. We took the power away from the politicians and gave it to ordinary people where this belongs. And so this is very simple. The politicians hated it. Joe, you know that. They hated it. They were attacking it. Remember, Nancy Pelosi spent $4 million against it. I mean, the Democrats spent a fortune against it. The Republicans spent a fortune against it. They didn't like it. They hated it because it took away their power of controlling everything. And so, but we won it. So I think that my governorship had a really long-lasting impact. That's the important thing, that we're not just up there in Sacramento and do things that have just kind of an immediate impact, because that's what most politicians do. They just want to have something work immediately so they can declare victory, but not in the long run. And this one, you know, has really long, you know, kind of a long impact. It's like Hiram Johnson. You know, he, as I told you many times, he has been one of my idols. More than 100 years ago when he was governor, he then created and then became senator later on. He created this direct democracy kind of principles and system. And, I think that this has been really absolutely fantastic that we can do that. And, and I think that we have to make the politicians be accountable for what they're doing because, we passed, for instance, when I was governor, we passed laws like California Political Reform Act, where, candidates and elected officials all had to disclose their financial interests and sources of income. And then also when there was elections, who spends money on those elections? Because they're all hiding behind something, right? They create a foundation or they create an organization, they call it some name, and then we don't know where the money comes from after that. So we passed laws to straighten that out and to really be more forthcoming on this whole thing. And like I always said, let the sun shine in. Let the people, let the public know what is going on. And that's the bottom line. So I'm a fanatic about this, and I think this political reform has really helped. And it's I just feel that we must hold our politicians accountable because, the important things don't get done. And that's why I said earlier, there's low-hanging fruits. I mean, they do the easy stuff. But what happens to the really important stuff? Like in California, for instance, we have had droughts for more than 100 years. Now we have all this rain and all this snowfall, but we don't have, still not after 100 years, built the infrastructure to go and to protect our water sources and to keep that water from running out into the ocean again, to keep it in the ground and to keep it stored in the storage places, in sinisters, in dams and stuff like that all over the state of California. So we have the water when there is a drought, when we have a problem and there's no rain. So, but they don't do it. This is difficult work. You have to understand.
It is. We're getting short on time. You did take infrastructure to the ballot. I remember that too. That was going to the people. I want to talk about climate and fighting pollution. Lots of people here all over the world are engaged with direct democracy, and not just initiative referendum, but citizens' assemblies, so lotteries and things, because they want to take action on climate. There's a real debate here. You hear people say democracy's too slow to attack climate. You see some of the same tools that we're talking about are used not just by people who are trying to do things on the environment or end pollution. It's used by interests that are trying to protect it. Your signature legislation bill, AB 32, which set up our climate change regime, has been attacked using direct democracy at the ballot. I'm curious, particularly thinking about the future. And you have think tanks and do work all over the world in this subject. How do you sort of think about climate and democracy together? How can democracy advance climate? How can climate serve democracy? I mean, how do you think about this subject? It's something that a lot of people here struggle with.
Well, you know why people are struggling with it? It's because of the lack of communication. I mean, you're a perfect example of that right now. You said 3 times climate, but you didn't mention pollution. So that is what is wrong with this whole movement, with the environmental movement. They're miscommunicating. I tell you, if I would use this kind of a method in communication to promote a film or to promote bodybuilding or fitness, I would be out of business, completely out of business. Because this is kind of like the craziest thing to talk about climate change. That's not the danger. The danger is pollution. What do you think what creates climate change? It is pollution. And so therefore we have to talk about pollution. And I learned it very quickly when we did polls in California that people worldwide don't respond to the climate change and the polar bears, and we have to do this clean, and we have to do that, and oh my God, the snow is melting. It is all nonsense dialogue. It's all over the place. I mean, you got to go and just say what it is. Pollution kills 7 million people a year. So that is the evil. This is what we have to terminate, is pollution. And then we can go and solve all the other problems. So when environmentalists talk, most people don't even understand what the hell they're talking about. I mean, people don't know what GHGs are and ppms are and so on and so forth. but they do know when their child has asthma and can't breathe anymore. So when we campaigned, we always used that. I said, look, this is about health. This is about survival. We want to go and make less people die. We want to reduce pollution. We want your children in the Central Valley in California to be healthy, not having to inhale all this pollution and get asthma, and then having children literally die from asthma. So we have to talk like that to the people. You know, it's no different than when we talked about infrastructure. Everyone talked about infrastructure, to build infrastructure in California, and no one responded. But when we said, do you get stuck on the freeway? Then everyone was nodding their heads and said, yeah. I said, you miss sometimes the football games of your children and the recitals because you're stuck on the freeway and then traffic? Yeah. I said, well, we want to build extra lanes. We want to build extra, bridges, on-ramps and off-ramps. And we want to rebuild our transportation. Then they responded and they voted for it. You see, it's all about how do we communicate. And to me, this is the number one problem that we have worldwide, that people are communicating terribly. I mean, even when I heard our president's State of the Union address the other day, just a month ago, he talked about, climate change. He never ever mentioned the word pollution. And he never mentioned how many people are dying of this whole thing. So it's a waste of communication, I think. And so this is why we always will be struggling with this. So that has not much to do with democracy. I think the key thing is, I think people should know that they should get involved. If people feel strong about something, Joe, this is what this is all about. Yeah. It's about action, taking responsibility. Don't sit in front of the television set and go and say, oh, this is terrible. Politicians are corrupt. I don't believe this is what's going on. They don't do anything about pollution. The question you have to ask yourself is, go in front of the mirror and ask yourself, what do you do about it? What do you do about it? I'm the kind of a person, I was in the middle of show business. I was making millions of dollars, $25 million a movie, and I was doing 2 movies a year, and I was doing just perfectly fine. But when I was supposed to go in there and promote health and fitness for the children through the President's Council on Fitness, I stepped into that job, and I traveled through all 50 states promoting health and fitness. When I saw an opportunity there that they need help with the after-school programs, I jumped in there and spent millions and millions of dollars of my own money on that, and endless amount of time to jump in there and to do something about it. And the same is with the environment, and the same is with running for governor, with all of those things, and about hate. There's a big problem in this country that people are getting one way into this hate thing and hate speeches and all this stuff. So we have to fight that. We have to take the bull by the horn and fight it. And so this is why I think people should get involved, not wait for the politicians. Get involved and fight. Remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. You have to participate. You have to battle it out and slug it out in there and just move things forward.
Thank you very much. Congratulations on the 20th anniversary of the recall that's coming in October. I think we'll be talking about that. And I thank you for this time, and we should leave it there. Hasta la vista.
Thank you, my friend. See you, bye-bye. Thank you. And I love Mexico.
Next, we're going to hear some more stories from around the world.
Vamos a escuchar más historias del resto del mundo a continuación. Next, the activity, Initial Histories of Democracy in All Over the World. We will do the proper setting up, and we ask all of you to please stay in your seats. Thank you very much. Would you please, can we have the presenters of our next session up here? Francis, Livingston, Marjan. La idea es que compartamos ideas sumamente cortas de 3-4 minutos, voces de diferentes partes del mundo, de todo el mundo. Y vamos a empezar con Marjan. ¿Sí te parece bien? Sí, vámonos allá. Nathan, tú te vas a encargar de la siguiente. O Nathan, ¿tú quieres ser el primero? Necesitamos 5 segundos. ¿Ya todos estamos aquí? Muy bien. We're gonna start. Muchas gracias. Bueno, yo tengo que decir que nunca había yo estado en el escenario después de este tipo de...
Hi, I'm Marjan Essasi. When I was first asked to say a few words this evening, the request was rather specific. Can you do a brief spotlight on Iran, Ukraine, or North Korea? To be honest, my first reaction was, wait a second, did I sign up for the right conference? I mean, how do you talk about these countries in the context of the democratic norms that we're talking about? Participation, engagement, voice. But seriously, I'm from Iran, and in fact, it is an inspiring time to talk about my country. Every day, young girls, very young girls, Iranian women and men, risk their lives for precisely the principles and the kind of democratic culture that we have gathered here to discuss. I would like to take a moment to salute them for their bravery. Zan Zindagi Azadi. Women, life, freedom. Thank you. Thank you. In the couple of minutes that I have, I'd like to say a few words about another population that I have great admiration for, and that is also voiceless, the brave people of North Korea, a population that lives in the most closed and undemocratic regime around the world. For 3 years, between 2012 and 2015, I had the great honor of working alongside North Korean defectors in South Korea. These defectors have faced the most harrowing journey. Their stories of escape are impossible, but not as impossible as the lives that they have left behind. In 2015, I was able to visit the Hermit Kingdom as a guest lecturer for a week. A privilege. I went in with a great mix of curiosity and absolute terror. There are many, many stories from that trip, but what remains with me most deeply is not our differences, but our similarities. North Koreans want exactly the same things we do: food, shelter, health, education, a job, and a space to express their voice. So how is it that this most repressive regime led by the Kim dynasty for 70 years has survived? A friend and colleague, Brian Boyle, recently conducted some compelling research, largely based on Albert Hirschman's famous book, Exit, Voice, and Loyalty. Hirschman proposes that these three concepts are in fact linked, and that with decreases in loyalty, citizens use voice and exit to respond to dissatisfaction. Based on case studies of authoritarian states, the argument is that ultimately what causes these states to open up and change is a reaction or a response to pressures from drops in loyalty, which are manifested either through the exercise of voice, protests, or through exit, which Hirschman refers to as voting with your feet, when citizens of a country begin to leave in significant numbers. Now, the rates of exit from North Korea have dropped since Kim Jong-un, and this has led some analysts to suggest that maybe there is less of a desire to leave the country. But interviews recently conducted with North Koreans indicate that, in fact, loyalty has declined. The lack of exit in the past few years is largely, and this is important, due to restrictive measures introduced by Kim Jong-un. For instance, shoot-to-kill orders, death camps along with the risk that up to 3 generations of your family can be imprisoned with you because of guilt by association. As a result, the cost of voice and exit are unacceptably high and inconceivable for most. But this is only part of the issue. The other part, and this is the part that I ask you to reflect on this evening, is that the cost of exit is also high because of China's strict border security and South Korea's unfriendly policies, which place additional barriers on entry. So what this research suggests is that if we put serious resources into supporting the exit of North Koreans, for instance, if we work with countries like South Korea to encourage policies that welcome more North Koreans, or if we apply pressure on countries like China, we can potentially help reduce the cost of exit, and in so doing, send a strong message to North Koreans that we are with them, that we are trying to create spaces for exit, and ultimately for the exercise of their voice. And so, faced with a potential large exodus, will Juche, this repressive and undemocratic ideology of self-reliance, begin to crack? I think it's worth considering. Thank you very much.
You can just grab it right there. Next up is Nathan Gardells from the Berggruen Institute.
Hello, is this working? Yeah, is this working? Yeah. So we had the illustrious former governor of California give you a good view of one aspect of direct democracy in California. And I want to fill out the picture. So California adopted the direct democracy system from Switzerland in 1911 when its population was less than Switzerland is today, 5 to 6 million. Today, California has 40 million people and therefore is the largest direct democracy in the world. With a direct democracy that large, the entire picture has to include the good, the bad, and the ugly. So what the governor talked about with Joe's prompts was the good. People rising up against corrupt corrupt politicians, taking action and changing. That's the great aspect of direct democracy in California, the initiative, the recall, and the referendum. There's the bad, and then there's the ugly. I want to come back to the bad because that's the main issue right now. The ugly is votes against same-sex marriage, votes against services to immigrants that were thrown out by the courts. The bad is, the main problem with California today, direct democracy, is the citizens have no role. So what's happened is that the legislature will pass a law, for example, to make contractors into employees. Uber and Lyft will then go to the ballot with a referendum, spend $224 million to overturn the legislation, persuade the public at the ballot box, and their stock value went up $13 billion the next day. Same thing is happening at the present moment with fast food, minimum wages in the fast food industry. The legislature passed a law to create a commission to regulate wages in the fast food sector. McDonald's, Big Mac, Burger King, Jack in the Box have already gathered hundreds of millions of dollars to overturn the legislation. This is the total corruption of direct democracy. So the citizens have no role. There's the legislature, the politicians, and the organized special interests. We're the citizens. So what California needs and what we're working on with the Secretary of State and some others in California is to bring citizens back into the process through deliberation, citizens review panels of ballot initiatives and referendums, potentially citizens' assemblies, so that they can themselves propose ballot measures the way organized special interests do. So when you look at California, you've got the good, the bad, and the ugly, and there's a lot of work to fix it. So just having direct democracy is not the answer. It's having direct democracy that actually works for the citizens. And I see my 1 minute sign, so I'm fine right now. Thank you.
Thank you. From Los Angeles, maybe we can go to Penang, Malaysia, to Francis K.W. Loh, who has had an incredible life and career of scholarship, activism, and democratic work. It should work. He's good, though he's not going to talk about Malaysia. He's going to talk about someplace else.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. I just got in this morning, so if I don't talk sense, forgive me. I retired from the university and I actually began to start work in Myanmar. And over the last 12 years, I've been going in and out of the country. It was a great pleasure, opportunity. And this was their period of transition. Transition in the sense that they were detaching themselves from the military regime. Daw Aung San Suu Kyi came to power, and she began to then open the system up. This is something that you don't see from afar. There are very good things that were happening on the ground, but you know, the focus in the international media was always on the Rohingyas, and unfortunately, given too much focus. Of course, you know that 2 years and 1 month ago, the military seized power. You know, and threw back Aung San Suu Kyi and all the leaders, you know, into jail. A lot of people began to flee the country, and they crossed over to the borders, you know, of Thailand. And what is so interesting now is that actually the military expected to take over completely everything, you know, and shut down like they did 20 years ago. But however, the revolution has persisted. And this is the term that the people are using. And the youths have sworn, we shall not live another day under a military dictatorship. You know, so this is the promise that they have made. So what has happened since is that they have actually moved to the borders across to Thailand. They've set up a new alternative government. It's called the National Unity Government. Instead of parliament, they have actually now got a consultative council, and they have been able to reach a rapport with the long existing ethnic armed groups, you know, all across, from the north to the south. The problem of Burma, do not forget, for one instance, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, very difficult to organize. And so they have sworn again. They're in the process of preparing a new charter, a new constitution. This will be to create a federal democratic union. Federal democratic union. It also implies that, how do you start? And what's so interesting is that you start with local democracy. And so what has happened is the military has no control over the rural, far-flung, you know, hinterland. And at that level, everybody is then beginning to organize their thing. Local authorities are beginning to emerge to guarantee some kind of law and order, you know, peace and stability, to adjudicate when there are disputes with one another. These are ordinary people beginning to stand up to make these decisions. They are even in the refugee camps, they are beginning to provide education. You know, and they are now, I've looked at the document, I've made comments on this, they're trying to create a federal democratic education policy from the bottom up. From the bottom up. Not from Washington, not from Naypyidaw, not from New Delhi, from the bottom up. Of course, there are problems, and I'll end here. The problem is that in any nation, over-decentralized, you need to link back to the center and with one another. And that's the big challenge that remains for them. But the spirit is there. They're taking it, you know, they're responding to this military dictatorship. Thank you.
And our last story here, we're from, we go to Kampala, Uganda. Please, to Dr. Livingston Sewanyana, who's a human rights lawyer, and also does quite a bit of work with the UN High Commission on Human Rights. He's also here because he's one of the world's leading experts on transnational democracy, and there are people amongst you who are working for transnational direct democracy. Livingston.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening. As Joe has said, I come all the way from Kampala, Uganda, East Africa. I'm delighted to be here at the 2023 Global Forum on Democracy. But besides the grassroots work that I do as a Democrat activist, I am also the United Nations independent expert on promoting a democratic and equitable international order. And by virtue of that, I profile best practices, and I look forward to sharing this with member states, the lessons that are being learned here. Having said that, I'm not here to share a democratic experience as such. Uganda is not a democracy as such, but at least to share an experience that actually fosters active citizen participation. As you are aware, the 1980s and the 1990s saw in Africa a wind of change. There was need for political transformation and promotion of active citizen participation. In Uganda, after so many years of political turbulence, they established a regime that saw it necessary to transfer power to the citizens. As part of that process of transformation, a statute called the Resistance Council Statute was passed, where every village throughout the country elects a 9-member committee which oversees matters regarding the village. And in that way, the villagers or the citizens in that village oversee issues of security, matters of health, matters of education, and infrastructure. Through that effort, they are able to determine their own destiny, they are able to have their voices heard, and in all that, they foster civic and active citizen participation. However, all that is not well because we are experiencing increasingly a democratic reversal. That I will be able to share with you in next time. Thank you for your audience.
With that, I'd like to actually excuse Livingston and Francis and Nathan and Marjan and Miguel, if you could stay here, and if we could be joined by the other members of the next panel. So please, thank you so much. With Dr. Wei, Tess Bacala, Fernando Pindado, and thank you so much. And last but certainly not shortest, Daniel Schilly to the stage. And this is where the, for the tech folks, this is where the presentation comes in. First up, as we come up, because we'll keep going and we don't want to keep you too much longer from the reception. Let's see, am I in the right place? No, I'm not, of course. This is, you know, you should never let reporters organize things. Okay, so I think we... So first up here, and to give us a sort of a framing and some data, is Miguel Angel Lara Tola, who is he's from Mexico City, but also does time in Stockholm, on the island where International IDEA is based. They're full of experts and research, and he's going to give us a very 5-minute or less framing of this topic. The topic of this panel is, will direct democracy really save democracy? Experiences from around the world. Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. I'll try to keep it under 5 minutes, but I won't promise. Do I get a clicker for the presentation? Or will someone help me change slides? Ok, bueno, buenas tardes. Me voy a sumar a la rebeldía de Lorenzo Córdoba y agradecerles a todos.
Lorenzo Córdoba, and I would like to thank you all. I would like to thank you all for this great event, and specifically for inviting me and for inviting IDEA International, Claudia and Joe. Thank you very much. And to directly address the question, would direct democracy save democracy? The answer is yes, but not by itself. And as long as direct democracy and all its different mechanisms comply the intention, which is to empower citizens and not to have manipulation in favor of power. And this is exactly what my very short presentation is going to be all about. I would like to first give you the general context of what we've seen in the world in recent years: unhappiness, mistrust, and crisis in representation. And the last wave data says that 58.5% of the people do not trust in anything. They trust just a little bit in its government. 75% of them do not trust their political parties. 65% of them do not trust their parliaments. This is information from France and from the United States. In the case of the United States, 2016, before the election, one piece of information: 50% of white illiterate people didn't feel represented in Washington, in those institutions, in those political parties, in those public policies. And the answer: Trump. Trump. The same happened in the case of France, where Marine Le Pen said that, speaking about the Homes de Sevilla, and they were the ones who voted for her. The answer to that crisis, very short, you know this. Chamon has said that the people goes against democracy. Zuber Levitsky, very well read in Mexico, how painful democracy, the democratic ladder is used to reach power, and once people are in power, this democratic ladder dismantles to stay in power, taking advantage of unhappiness of people, and they come to power and they don't want to leave. The next slide. This is what is very important to reconnect with the citizens. In our report 2022 by IDEA about the status of democracy, we spoke about the idea of reinforcing the social contracts. It shouldn't be a constitutional process, but we need to design institutions that will be closer to the citizens, not like exactly as in Chile, and to be able to help to solve problems. And direct democracy can help us be connected to the citizens. Consults, referendum, people's initiatives. With this, we can know the interests of the citizens. We can have a public agenda. We can work in favor of deliberation, in favor of debate, and to be able to make decisions. Here we have two well-known examples. Panama 2016, people were asked whether or not they wanted to have a third set of gates for the channel. They said yes. Switzerland 2020, if they want to continue with the free transit of Schengen people in Europe, they said yes. But not all countries are Panama and Switzerland. Here, unfortunately, here I have two maps. I didn't have space for more. I only have 5 minutes, but this is a database of direct democracy of IDEA. You can see the green countries that have direct democracy mechanisms. Here you can see two countries with a revocation referendum. And with referendum, interesting piece of information. And if you see many of the green countries, which are not Panama or Switzerland, which are not non-democratic countries, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Serbia, Uganda, Venezuela. And this is telling us that if there is no democratic context, then these mechanisms can go into evil. The next one, please. And I want to show you a gross example of this. Maybe you do not get to see, but I will read this for you. It is a voter's ballot for the elections 1978, 5 years after the coup d'etat in Chile. Augusto Pinochet against Salvador Allende, elected by people, and after many accusations of infringement of human rights, he asked. And of course, it was a process where there was no guarantee of competence, where the opposition was in silence. The question was, in light of the international aggression that started against the government of our nation, does the Pinochet president, when defending the dignity of Chile and reaffirming the legitimacy of the government of the Republic in order to head the institutionalization process of the country? And if you see, and yes, we have the Chile's color. Who is not going to say yes when speaking about defending sovereignty in your country? So we need to be careful, because as you can see in the title, evil is in the details. The next one, please. A good design will help, and this is a commercial. In IDEA, we have a manual, the global password towards a modern direct democracy. We did it together with the Switzerland government, and we presented the several good practices very quickly to have a well-designed question. It is not a question designed by the dictator, Pinochet, or another one, and questions should not be completely open. And in Mexico, we have a good example at the constitutional level, where questions should not be asked about the electoral aspects. There are no votes for the fundamental rights of people. These are good practices. Campaigns should be equal. All people should be given financing, and of course there is good citizens' participation and the process. Every stage of the process should be always electorally complete. and honest. And this is why I would like to conclude by saying that direct democracy can actually help us as long as we take care of the details, because remember, this is where the evil is, and this is also where authoritarianism is. And as we can see, bad intentions can also be infiltrated into processes that have good intentions and in mechanisms that have good intentions. Gracias. Ahora tenemos, él es el experto de idea internacional en el desarrollo.
Election Integrity Project at the Universities of Sydney and Harvard, and something called INE. We're going to make this more of a conversation. Dr. Wei, we're going to put the first question to you, is a little more comfortable at the podium. Paiku Wei is an associate professor at the College of International Affairs, National Tsinghua University in Taiwan. He currently holds the position of Vice Dean of the College of International Affairs. We held the Global Forum in Taiwan in 2019. Dr. Wei, Taiwan has made some advances and changes in direct democracy law. There's been back and forth. It's also become known as a leader and really pioneer in design of digital democracy. Yeah. So my question is, what is that getting? The question is direct democracy, saving democracy. What has that done for Taiwan? Is that stopping democratic backsliding in the society? And does it provide any measure of security for Taiwan with the threat it faces that we all know so much about?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Joey, for your very important question. So my dear friend and colleagues, good evening. I would like to share some ideas and very short remarks because time to dinner. Yeah. Firstly, I would like to give some survey. You know, in Freedom in the World 2020 report, Freedom House gives Taiwan a 94 of 100 ratings, meaning Taiwan counts as fully free. Yes, Taiwan is one of the most advanced democratic countries in Asia. But you know, Taiwan now stands on the front line of authoritarian China's attack on democracy every day. You know, last year, the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has said China's government is pursuing its plan to annex Taiwan on a much faster timeline under Xi Jinping. At a critical moment, in my opinion, consolidation of Taiwan's democracy is in the full interest of the United States and like-minded nations like Japan, South Korea, and European countries, both because these nations hold stakes in Taiwan's enhanced political development, and because Taiwan's case can become a prime example of successful democratization for Indo-Pacific region. Therefore, we must work together actively and defend our common value, that's the value of democracy, and create a better democratic future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Wei. And we're going to try to have some more discussion. I want to bring in Anne Ravel, who is a former chair from California, from San Jose, California, which you should not go to escape high costs in Los Angeles, like the song suggests. It's not a good idea. Former chair of the U.S. Federal Election Commission, which sounds like it might be like an electoral body, but it's not like being Lorenzo Cordova. Nobody takes your picture. Okay, so before that, I was the chair of something called the Fair Political Practices Commission, which is the elections and political enforcement in California, which was actually started by a ballot initiative by Direct Democracy in 1974. She also has some history in South America. Mother's Brazilian and lived in Chile as a kid and advocates globally, works globally on the issue of transparency. My question is, Yeah, sit there, grab the thing. Let's try to make this a is that okay? Yeah, try to grab that thing. It should work.
Okay.
So how do you come at this question? Because, I mean, in our country, our shared country, the United States, how do you come at this question of direct democracy saving democracy? Sometimes when I hear you, I'm not sure I think anything can save democracy.
Yeah, let me start by talking about a little bit about our democracy in the United States. And I thought it was interesting that you spoke of Freedom House, because Freedom House has rated the United States below Argentina in democracy. And it is really problematic there. And it's problematic because people don't have trust in government. People don't have trust. I mean, I hate to, follow on Schwarzenegger and say that I agree with him on anything, but he's right about it. Most people believe that our government is bought and sold, that the politicians only care about money, and it's that small minority of people who are making decisions in the country. And that is the case, in fact. And a lot of people are really upset about it. And of course, we have had enormous amount of democratic backsliding. But I do think that, and I'd also like to comment, because the person who was sitting next to me before talked about California and the California direct democracy, which I agree with him. I think it needs quite a bit of reform because, for example, I mean, Schwarzenegger came in after a recall. California is famous for recalls. There's hundreds of them that they've had, and more recently, people are being recalled if they're members of school boards because people don't like what they are doing for their children in particular. But also, I mean, we know in the federal government, generally, there are a lot of problems with the courts because the courts have been, the Supreme Court has been essentially turned into a political arm of the Republican Party. So I do think that direct democracy, as discussed, where it is truly civic participation, where people can meet and talk about issues, because initiatives in California are so complicated, people don't understand what what their impact will be, and as a result, people just vote yes or no based on very little information, which is really problematic because there are hundreds of initiatives in California, many of them brought, as was said before, by special interests as well, but many of them come from the public. So if there was true inclusion of all people in the state, in the country, in deliberations about issues that are civil, because there is so much polarization in the United States, I think direct democracy is probably a good response if we could organize it in a way that is going to make a difference.
But we need to have actual national elections and not a series of local elections, right?
That's true.
Gotcha. Let me, let's go from San Jose to Manila. Tess Bacala is the editor-in-chief of Asia Democracy Chronicles, which I urge you to read. It's the media arm of the Asia Democracy Network. It's civil society organizations. You don't need to turn it on. They warned me not to try to touch the buttons. A regional organization of civil society organizations seeking to advance the democratization of governance in Asia. You're a journalism lecturer. You served as executive director of the Southeast Asia Press Alliance. Let's talk about the picture across Asia. I'm particularly interested in the Philippines and Indonesia. You see democratic, some democratic slippage, to put it nicely, in parts of Asia. You don't see a ton of direct democracy, Taiwan being an important example, Korea in some ways. How does the picture look for you? And could direct democracy in the Asian context inspire more democracy, or is it dangerous?
Is it working?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's working.
Hi. In Asia, it's what is in place is representative democracy in much of the region. But there are direct democracy mechanisms that are in place, that have been put in place by law, and that are mandated by Constitution. In the Philippines, for example, shortly after we had the People Power Revolution in 1986, we had the 1987 Constitution, which made sure that there would be wide, broad-based public participation in policy making. Civil society organization would have representations in local public councils, for example. It's pretty much the same elsewhere in Asia, in Thailand. There have been laws instituting civic direct democracy mechanisms. So while we don't have, as a form of government, direct democracy, the tools are there through formal mechanisms by law and informal mechanisms. In much of Asia, the Philippines included, Indonesia, Thailand, and even Cambodia, there's a strong civil society culture that helps ensure the public will have a voice in policy making. But the results have been mixed at best. There have been very positive results of the use of civil direct democracy tools. There have been also instances where these were used by autocrats. Like, for example, in Thailand, the Prime Minister used a referendum to make sure that even if a Prime Minister is not an elected member of the House of Representatives, he can still serve as Prime Minister. And this is through, this is by decision of the National Legislative Assembly, where 250 members, senators, are appointed by the military. So it's been used for good purposes, and it's also been used to foster authoritarianism. So my answer to the question is yes and no. Yes, if it's used in its truest form, and we don't have a dearth of examples to show that it works. But we also don't have a dearth of examples to show that they have been used for purposes other than what they have been intended. So,
thank you, Tess. Thank you, Tess. A mi derecha es Fernando Pindar, profesor colaborador del Instituto de Gobierno y Políticas Públicas de la Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona y consultor en políticas públicas, acción comunitaria y participación ciudadana. Fernando?
There is a very strong opinion between or among people who speak about democracy.
You want me to do this in English? I can do it. It's easier. But hay una opinión fuerte entre las personas del movimiento de democracia. Es que estamos entrando
for democracy. English or Spanish. Un poquito de ucraniano y de coreano antes de terminar.
En un cambio de era. Lejos del gobierno de los políticos, a un gobierno de los ciudadanos. A menudo en procesos participativos, con loterías, asambleas de ciudadanos. Mi pregunta.
So my question to you is this type of direct democracy, and is it going to be the savior of democracy? Shall we be careful about the new democracy that can potentially be a new way of tyranny? Thank you. I apologize. He was speaking English, and then he was speaking in Spanish, and I believe it is the influence of those people who were before me. In order to save democracy, what we are missing is democracy, and in order to have democracy, what we need to have is democrats. And if there are no people who believe, who prove that the democratic system is the one that can more efficiently solve problems when living in a community. And if they are just waiting for saviors, for leaders who are charismatic and will come to solve problems, and if they do not believe in the fact that we can more easily elect people who are going to participate in those decision-making processes. And if it is thought that there are people in power doing this, there's going to be no democracy. What you said after since the beginning of this session, what you said is telling us that we are going back in time, and this is where we need to have Democrats so that there is democracy. And if I may, I would like to make a joke. And maybe the next forum, the Global Forum on Democracy, might not be about direct democracy. What if we lose 1D? What if it is going to be only democracy? Because maybe what is at risk is the political system as a whole. And this is why what we need is to activate, citizens should get activated to be aware that the way to improve and to solve problems is not the individuality, but the collective class actions. And what in this piece by Cervantes, Sancho Panza, is discovering how one person is walking next to the castle, and this guy says, I am here to have new fresh air. And Sancho Panza gets upset and he says, I will punish you and I will take you to jail and you're going to sleep there. And then the guy told him, you are very powerful. You can kill me, but I will sleep if I want to sleep. So we can establish many channels of participation. We can establish many rules, many standards, but people will use it if they want to use it. And in order to use it, they need to see how evident their need is in order to have a better life. Muy bien. Por último, y felicidades.
Capital of democracy. I tried to vote for you, but they wouldn't let me, actually. Online, they were screened out. Last panelist is Daniel Schiele, the co-founder of Democracy International and Mehr Demokratie in Germany. That means more democracy. You know, there used to be a show on television in the United States called This Is Your Life. I feel like the question of this panel, Daniel, is your life. You back in 1988, you got together with others, you established this German democracy organization, right? You've dedicated your life to realizing more direct democracy, citizen participation in Germany, around Europe. You got even a double-decker bus going around Europe. It couldn't get to Mexico City, they couldn't find a road. And then at the global level. And you've done all this promotion of democracy and the like. Or in Europe, is Europe any more democratic? You know, in any better shape? Has it saved itself? Has it saved its democracy from all this work? What has it all meant? That's my question for you.
So probably, as you know, we are a united Europe in the West, at least.
Yes.
We would like to have more states in it, for example, Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I want to take the opportunity, not in a partisan way, to think about this very, very sad story in the middle of Europe. And we had many interns from Russia and also from Ukraine working with us in Cologne, and they were also thinking about our questions. But if it comes to the concrete question, I would say democracy cannot be saved at all. Like a preservation of whiskey or tequila in a pot. Democracy has to be baked every day, and I would like to say it's about representative democracy. It might surprise you. I don't believe in this idea that there could be a totalistic direct democracy system. I never believed this. And I think, but of course, democracy can be baked like a good bread every day, can be baken. And this is what's about democracy. And there can be, of course, very well-established system who can reproduce this bread of a good democracy every day and every year. And of course, Switzerland and others, which are, of course, representative democracy, they include, of course, occasions where people directly elect people and directly vote on matters. It's a very simple thing. And then, of course, if it comes to the concrete recipe of a representative democracy, the question comes, how often do we elect? Do we elect a president? I'm looking forward to your panel. Do actually directly elected presidents harm democracy? That's also interesting
Tomorrow night,
question.
at La Casa de la
will be
Primera.
tomorrow night. But I make it short now. You know, I was really participating during all these global forums, and I think it's really about the recipe of representative democracy. And in this recipe, there has to be, this of course needed in a democracy, if you don't have election, if you don't have referenda and direct say, then it's not a democracy at all. But concretely, you have to think how to do it the best. And then I'm always surprised why we don't compare each other, why we don't learn like technicians. You know, the German auto industry might be very good, but now we had to learn from Elon Musk to build electric cars. Now we also do this. Why don't we compare? Why are we always in an ideological way talking about this and that? And I used the opportunity to do a little commercial about our direct democracy navigator. There you can really find all the direct democracy procedures in the world, locally, regional, even the ECI, a transnational instrument, and you can really compare and learn. And this is really the question we are dealing with in our global forum. How is representative democracy built? How direct democracy, modern direct democracy in detail. It's very important what the scientist said in the beginning. How is it organized? How is it practiced? And there are very good examples and there are also bad examples.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm going to ask for a quick answer, but I want to ask a question that's a Mexico question to a panel with only one person from Mexico on it. You know, if I were running the Mexican sports, I would go to FIFA and say, let's stop making the World Cup about football. This is only driving us crazy and being very frustrated. We're never going to really win. Okay, sorry. You know, let's make this about the amount of democratic tools and options that exist in the governing documents at all levels. Because if that were the case, Mexico would be winning the World Cup, or at least getting to the finals against Switzerland every time, okay? It would go much better. Bruno Kaufmann, my co-president, recently reported that just in your states, you've got more than 250 legal designs or procedures stemming from initiatives and referendums. However, there's such a gap between rules and practice, which is on the Direct Democracy Navigator, which you can Google, came out of this forum, in fact, and this is not true just in Mexico, and so this is really my question. You see a lot of places that have it on the books, that have direct, participatory, all kinds of tools, and then two things happen. They don't get used because there's not access. There's not support, it requires money. I mean, the California Direct Democracy system, I was being very nice, works a lot better if you're being paid $25 million per picture. I tell you, it's a lot more accessible, than it is for some of us. Or these tools actually get used against democracy by the people at the top, powerful interests, politicians, and the rest. So that's my question. Does that observation, is that what you're seeing in your different parts of the world where you see it? Miguel, I'll start with you.
I'll reply in Spanish. Bueno, yo creo que no se trata de las herramientas, de tener las herramientas y los mecanismos.
A matter of having the tools or the mechanisms. It is a matter of how these are designed, how they are used, and then the results. I said in my presentation that not everything is Panama or Switzerland, and now with your question, I remember that once I was in Switzerland and I was doing a consult process to the population about how million euros were to be kept in international reserves. No, it was a question about gold. And I saw direct democracy in action all political parties in the same level, at the same level, design information packages, one disc and one flyer. This information was given to all the households, to all the voters of the country. They had enough time, enough information to think about this very clear question. The question was designed by different players. The language was unbiased, and it depends on how things are being used. And I also believe, and what comes to my mind is the example of Bolivia. In the maps that I showed, there were several countries that have these mechanisms, but evil comes into them. They are manipulated or tampered in favor of power. I remember some years ago, I think it was in 2016, Evo Morales made a consult, a referendum to be re-elected once more. He used it to get re-elected as Pinochet, but there he lost it. And after that, he said, the people is wrong. And with his ministers, the Constitutional Court, at the Supreme Court, they did an interpretation of the Constitution in order to construe it as a human right and to have him in power till the day he dies. So this is a contrast, and this is an example of having mechanisms. But as I said, evil is in the details. Muchísimas gracias. Miguel, Dr. Way.
You see the political parties, which are quite powerful, using the process quite a bit, the direct democracy process. How would you answer the question?
Yes, in Taiwan, just 20 years ago, we begin to conduct referendum. It's like direct democracy. Till now, we have conducted 20 referendum, nationwide. Yes, I think practice is very useful. In the first time in Taiwan, the referendum is like a weekend. It's the first time, so it's like something like chaos. But gradually, Taiwanese people are familiar with this kind of direct democracy. I told you a history, Taiwan began democratization just 30 years ago. During the 1984, before 1987, if anybody say direct democracy or referendum, will be get to the jail, or maybe you will get very, very big trouble. During that time, it's in martial law in Taiwan. So I think political culture over practice is also an important part to conduct direct democracy. Yeah, thank you.
Fernando, esta pregunta a ti.
Bien, en España...
I'm listening to myself. Technology is not my thing. In Spain, the democratic system, democrat system that was created after the process when the dictatorship died and there was a restriction process to reach democracy. The system that consolidated is a system that is based on the representative dimension. There is no direct dimension. In Spain, only 2 referendums have happened in 4 years, and it is not a referendum. It is plebiscites. It is what we would call as the witch in the Snow White when asking the mirror, is there something more good-looking than me? This is the type of referendum in Spain, and people are very afraid from the institution and political party perspective. There are only a few expressions, and people are afraid of the direct dimension of democracy or direct democracy. And the problem in Spain is that we are trying to make progress and to build mechanisms with this dimension and with this characteristic. That has been very, very difficult. And in places like the one I come from Spain, but I am from Catalonia. And in Catalonia, defending freedoms and rights is difficult because working with the rest of the state of Spain is more complex. And each time we speak about referendum or direct democracy, unfortunately, it makes us think that there is one part of the territory that wants to leave the rest of the territory. I believe it is very important. Personally, I believe we need to speak more about democracy as a system, and we need to understand the representative dimension as part of the system, because sometimes we only underscore the participative word and direct and participative, but it is the three legs of the same thing, and if the three legs do not work, then the political system known as democracy will not work. Senor Shelley.
Yeah, there's a simple rule, Joe. If you introduce instruments of direct democracy, you really should introduce them. Very often, politicians and parliaments tend to obstruct it right in the beginning by high hurdles. And I have a very concrete detail. I live in the beautiful city of Bonn. You visit us?
Beethoven's hometown.
Yeah, Beethoven.
You still haven't introduced me to him.
Yeah. But we have in our country is North Rhine-Westphalia, very complicated name, and we have limited rules about local direct democracy rules. It says if citizens collect signatures and want to have a ballot initiative for a local referendum, then they have not to use too much money. It must not be very expensive what they want. So, for example, we have a very nice train station surrounded by beautiful old houses, and now the city came with the stupid idea. You can see it afterwards, to build their many houses for shops, Gucci and so on. They never came. Gucci never arrived. Now and it was forbidden to have this local referendum because they wanted to sell this very valuable space to special interests. And now the train station is surrounded by ugly, empty buildings because other stores close. You know, the transportation people go to the green, drive outside. They don't come anymore in the city. And now we can say this limitation of direct democracy we have in our North Rhine-Westphalia state is frustrated people and brought up people against democracy. On the other hand, we have Bavaria and we have the city of Munich. They don't have this limitation on direct democracy, and because we, as the initiative Mehr Demokratie, we introduced the law for direct democracy, and we said it's very simple. Everything what the local municipality hall can do, the citizens should also be allowed to do. And right away, when we in 1995 introduced this law, interesting enough, the Christian Democrats, which were ruling in the country, and in the left, so liberal governed Munich, might surprise you that the city of Oktoberfest is a liberal city, but they always elect social democrats. So the Christian Democrats right away took the advantage and said, well, we opposed direct democracy on the local level, but now Mehr Demokratie has introduced it. Now we will collect signatures for a sinful, expensive thing. They wanted to dig tunnels to clean the transportation problem. And they won. So the Social Democrats, of course, said, now you can see what populist movements do. Our city is ruined now. But at the end, Munich is now the most car-friendly, but it's the most expensive city. They are very rich, no problem. So you can see it worked out. So the simple rule is, if you introduce processes of direct democracy, make it fair and simple. If you introduce procedures of deliberative democracy, please think about not to frustrate people by having all these instruments, and at the end say, well, we had a nice deliberation and this and that, and yeah, goodbye.
Tess, the same question, to test the same question you, rules and practice.
Sorry?
This question of rules and practice, the difference between so many places having the rules, here, including here, but not as much healthy practice. I mean, it goes back to people used to talk about if you read the 1936 Soviet Union Constitution, it has the most beautifully designed referendum system I've ever seen, but Stalin never let them use it, right? I mean, it is that gap. And I wonder in Asia how you think about rules versus practice. Or you talked about it's there, it's there in the rules, right?
The Philippines is said to have some of the best laws, for example, in terms of civil society. But talk about practice, for example, that's a totally different matter. So rules and practice will always have inconsistencies. But does that reflect, talk about direct democracy? Is that a reflection on direct democracy or democracy for that matter? Or a reflection on the state of affairs where this is being applied? And in that regard, do you give up on democracy because it has not worked, notwithstanding the good rules that are in place, and practice is very bad? My quick answer is no. Democracy is not a one-shot deal. It's a process. And you need to be very patient with it. Asians have been very patient with it. That's why there's this concept of democratic resilience, which, by the way, some authors are saying have not been studied enough. Notwithstanding the situation, why is there the democratic resilience? And I see that a lot because of the kind of work I do. We monitor human rights situation in Asia. We come up with stories, bringing out unreported and underreported stories on marginalized communities. Of course, patience can also be a virtue and a vice at the same time. But we can never give up on it, notwithstanding the difference in rules, the difference in practice. We need to keep at it. We need to keep at it, even if your idea of a democratic world is so far from what you're seeing every day. But you need to keep at it. Just very quickly, I wanted to mention, when Timor-Leste voted in a referendum for its independence from Indonesia, because Timor-Leste was under Indonesian rule for 24 years. You know what happened in 1999? The Indonesian government revoked that law. Okay, because it worked. They didn't want to lose Timor-Leste. But, so it worked both ways. If Indonesia knew this was going to happen, and, it's a good thing they didn't know it was going to happen, there would not have been a referendum. But it has worked to the benefit of Timor-Leste, that direct participation mechanism, and for Indonesia, it was counterproductive. Okay, so clearly it's an example of working well and not well, but still it achieved its purpose. So yeah, I just want to impress on that. And coming from where I come from, we see that a lot. You just don't give up on it.
Anne, the same question to you. Thank you for waiting patiently.
Primero, quiero hablar un poco de México. Okay? So,
Yo he trabajado con el INE.
With the Tribunal Electoral Supremo. And what I learned and what I think is what affects rules here versus rules in the United States, for example, and is that Mexico believes, first off, the institutions are amazing. INE is amazing. And they really care about the community and about all the people and making sure that the votes, at least in this time period, that the votes are fair and free. And what I think is really also a key, and I think it might have been mentioned, but in Mexico, they have the pro persona principle. And that principle is that in all, whether it be in the electoral process, whether it be in the legislative process, in the administrative branch of government, they have to look at international human rights principles, declarations, treaties. The United States has never, ever even passed one of those. And so that has a different perspective on what is important in democracy. And I think that's why I'm so impressed with what they do here in Mexico.
Thank you very much. I think, I think we're gonna, should we, Ann, are you giving me the cut? Is that it? Or is that it? Should we stop? Yeah. No, I don't think 15. Maybe, let's get in, I don't want to keep you too much more from the reception. Let's get, it's 10, right, Itzel? So can we get, just in order, like really, like 3 quick questions from the audience? Do we have anyone to run around? Or this is testing the operations. To get a question from the audience, do we have, should I go into the audience, Itzel? I grew up, as a latchkey kid, left at home watching Phil Donahue. Oh, here we go. So I'll do it. Oh, thank you. But please state a question. A question quickly, not a comment.
Yes, my question to all the panelists is that if they feel that there is a conflict between direct democracy and representative democracy, and if they're in conflict, how are we going to make the transition from direct democracy, from the representative democracy to direct democracy?
Thank you very much. Anyone, another question? See here, anyone? Is that looking, holding on? Okay.
Here,
all right, here we go.
Joe's question got into this a little, but I'm just curious, how do we encourage the civic participation that's necessary for all these tools to be used right? We've talked about the tools a lot, but how do we encourage that and make people use it? And how do we make it positive and not just be about everything that people are angry about, which so motivates them often? Thank you.
So we've had 2 men so far. Other questions? Hold on. Okay. Okay, hold on. All right. Anyone else? I'm not seeing a lot of hands. People really want to go to dinner. Okay.
Thanks, Joe. Específicamente la pregunta del caso de España, me interesaría saber cómo, si no han tenido mecanismos de democracia.
Since you haven't had direct democracy exercises directly, how can we here in Mexico, in Latin America, how can we go from our presidentialist system to a parliamentarian system like the one you have in Spain if consults have not worked and the mechanisms? Fernando, esa por favor, y gracias por las preguntas y esto. Gracias. In Spain, the direct democracy mechanism, an effort has been made to be implemented. And they've been implemented at the local level, at the municipal level. And I would like to also answer another question. The best way to promote the advertise the use of channels for democracy is to do it nearest to you, where government actions take place. In the case of Spain, and I believe in Europe, and I would say that in Mexico. So the nearest level is the local level, the community, because this is where people recognize each other. And in order to have direct democracy mechanisms, we have had to invent some tricks because there is an actual police persecution whenever a direct democracy mechanism is implemented. And if we do not understand democracy doesn't work without the 3 dimensions, then it will not work. And it is very difficult to do this in Spain because each time there is a local effort, there is rejection and judicial rejection by the justice, and it limits, and it's pretty scary for officers who are going to implement those processes because they are going to be called to give to appear. And it was recently ago when there was a female mayor of a city. She has had to appear in the court because she wanted not to implement direct democracy and she wanted to implement other mechanisms. And there is no opposition between direct and representative democracy, but there is one with the ones who have power, actual power. They are the ones who do not want to have this democratic exercise. La primera pregunta, ¿quién?
¿Le puedo contestar en español? Sí. Yo creo que no hay conflicto.
If there is no conflict between direct democracy and representative democracy, as long as direct democracy is not used, and this is what frequently happens, unfortunately, to go against the representative democracy and against the liberal democracy. Remember that when democracy reduces to the government of the majorities, it will quickly give rise to arbitrarities, because you can say 51% or 99.9% is saying this. It doesn't mean the other percentage doesn't count. Democracy, yes, it's a majoritarian component, but it also has a liberal component of basic fundamental rights to be enforced, and the Republican component, which is the rule of law. The law applies to everyone. So democracy is not the government of the majorities. It is the government of the majority that is listening and protecting the minority, and I believe this is where the trick is.
Quick answer to the second question, if I got it correctly. How do you encourage civic participation? Did I get it right? Don't rely on the government. Don't wait for the government to take the initiative. Because in many instances, it's the people, especially when they're organized at the community level, that, that take the initiatives. And more often than not, they achieve results. But if you wait for the government, no, this is not to talk down or, belittle. Government has its role. But in a situation such as what confronts us in our region, for example, initiatives have to be taken at the community level. I don't know to what extent it would apply, if at all, in Western countries, but in many parts of Asia, people are taking initiatives, and they work, They get the basic services they need, but if they were waiting forever for the government, they would not be getting those services. Just one example I wanted to.
And we all do not wait for the government. Therefore, we have the Global Forum, because we did not wait for the governments. We freely do it as activists. And of course, happily enough, we have also many official people amongst us which are elected, but really have this feeling of helping democracy to grow. And that's really about this Global Forum, which is now ahead of, and we have to debate and discuss all these questions.
Thank you. Let's leave it there. This has been a really dream come true to be here in this greatest city of the Western Hemisphere, and with my lights is the greatest museum on earth. It's amazing to be here. We've been in some pretty drab lecture halls and some universities, so this is quite a step up. I think we're done. Your patience is I'm not thanking you, but your patience is appreciated, and it is time for our reception. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow at buses at 7 a.m. for those going on the excursions, and we'll be underway at 11:55 at the Palacio de Medicina. Sometimes on the map it says Palacio de Mineral. That's a different Palacio. You want the Medicine Palace, not the Mineral Palace. For tomorrow's sessions, 11:55 going till 5:40, and then the Zocalo in the evening. Thank you.
Les esperamos el día de mañana en el Palacio de la Antigua Escuela de Medicina a partir de las 9:45 horas. Quienes se hayan registrado en las actividades de la Cámara de Senadores y Cámara de Diputados.
Those who are registered for the visits to the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate, you have your confirmation emails. Thank you and good evening.